Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this live event. Welcome. This is our third and last live event in SC1x. We really appreciate you joining us. So today, the plan will be for us to review some questions that will very likely be helpful for your final exam. I really hope that this will serve as a refresher and as a final practice before you take the exam. As you know, the exam will launch tomorrow at 1500 UTC. Make sure you figure out your timing and the differences in time, especially because recently we had a change in the time zones a few weeks ago. So make sure you got the time right. Then be cognizant of the due date. So once the final exam is open, it's gonna be open for 1 week and you'll have 4 hours to finish. So you have to finish it in one go, but you can start anytime in that week, as you probably very well know. Another thing that's important is the no feedback policy. So you already experienced that in the midterm. As you know, we decided to not share the feedback, and that's the green check mark or the red one that says whether you got that problem correct or wrong. So you won't get that information in the final exam. And again, the reason is to ensure the highest possible quality and integrity of the exams, and uh, consider these exam as pure assessment. So essentially, uh, you have practiced uh, and learned by watching videos and doing the practice problems. The exams are only for figuring out where you stand and how much you recall. Okay. So perfect. Let me quickly check if everything is okay in terms of voice or video. Let me know otherwise. Okay, looks good, I guess. So I'm going to share with you a couple more reminders. I have good news. We will have a boot camp. That's going to be a very exciting event, and you guys will qualify for it. And a little bit also about becoming a CTA and some of the ways that you could continue with Q&As. So let me share my slides. Okay. All right. You should be seeing these in full screen. Okay, perfect. So we talked about the final exam. Remember, you're not allowed to ask any questions specifically related to the final on the form. So any questions, for instance, clarification on what a specific question means, must be asked through the helpline email, SC1x help. However, we have created a discussion forum right under this live event section on the platform. There is a discussion link, as always. That discussion link, we've titled it Preparation for the Exam. There you could ask any kind of questions that may come up during this live event or as you're reviewing for the final. That will be an integrated place for asking questions for in preparation for the final. So you still have another day to do that. And but once the final exam is launched, we ask you to not discuss any of the specific questions on the discussion forum. Okay, perfect. So another point is Slido. I've opened the Q&A area in the Slido, so you can ask any kind of questions. However, please use the voting because I'm anticipating a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to all of those, but vote up those that you really like to be answered as soon as possible, and then we'll get to it either during the event or after. Now, if you have deeper questions about how to solve a specific problem, you probably can't address it in a live event. However, use that discussion board link that you see on the screen. That's the right place to do that, and then we'll have me, Andrea, or other CTAs get to your questions and answer them as soon as possible. We have another news for you. So MIT SCM Bootcamp is a 1-week intense learning experience on campus at MIT that's open to anyone who has passed at least SC1x in the course. So by the time you take the final and hopefully successfully you'll pass, you become eligible to join the boot camp, and this is a great way to spend a week on campus, and it's in summer, so very good time to be here. And you could use the link below. You could also search it online, MIT Supply Chain Bootcamp, for sign up or getting further information. So what's going to happen is you'll have some time to take online courses before you come to the campus to learn and prepare. Then you will spend a week on campus, and it's going to be very intense. Lots of classes from morning to night, and extra activities. Our best instructors will be teaching you advanced topics in supply chain management. So it's going to be a very, very good investment of your time. So if you want more information, you can use the link below, and then I'll share the slides with you as well. So with that, I'm going to share with you 3 problems that will build on top of each other in the area of inventory management. That's the bigger, one of the biggest topics that we covered in the course. So hopefully that will be of the most value to you. So let me make sure again that everything is correct. Again, you can use the Slido area to post any questions or comments. So, okay, perfect. We don't have any issues. Awesome. So let's dive into the questions and get ready for some math. I'm going to talk about inventory management with deterministic demand first. Then we will add stochastic demand. We'll solve a problem with that. And at the end, we will add the stochastic lead time, which is what we cover in the last week in the mode choice. So hopefully this set of problems will cover a wide range of topics. All right. So deterministic demand. If you remember from the EOQ, let me see, okay, yes. If you remember from the EOQ model, I'm sorry, one of my slides has been moved. So okay, so if you give me a moment, I am adding one, bringing back one of my slides. For some reason it's moved, and that's really important because we need to have the introduction of the problem. Okay, so all right. So this is about a campus shop. It's a shop on MIT campus that is selling T-shirts. So this store basically has a demand of 1,000 T-shirts, and so they sell 1,000 T-shirts per year, and then anytime they order anything, they have to spend $250 for the order. So they order their T-shirts through an external supplier, and every time they put in the order, the cost of it is $250. So what is that cost for? Creating communications, creating the form, the labor cost of accounting, and in a lot of cases, it also involves the setting up of the production plant. So anytime you create and start producing new line of products, you have to set up the production line. Molds have to be changed, settings have to be changed, and that comes with a cost. So that's 250 here. Now, the holding cost of these T-shirts is estimated to be $4 per year per item. Everything is here per year, the ones that we don't mention, and then monetary values are in dollars. So why is it? So how do we get this $4 per year per T-shirt holding cost? So essentially, what happens is, usually in a company setting, the accounting department will estimate that if we keep this T-shirt in our store for 1 full year, so it doesn't get sold, it sits in the warehouse, it sits on the shelf for a year. At the end of the year, what is its value? So usually the value will drop. A lot of the time, you will have damage. A portion of the inventory will just get damaged, or will lose its value, go obsolete, or for whatever reason, the total value of inventory is lower. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to happen to every item. Some items may be perfect, some may be damaged, but on average, this store estimates that there is $4 cost when they keep a T-shirt in for a year. Okay, so that's that. And then demand was 1,000 units. So the question here is, what is the inventory policy that this MIT store should follow? From the EOQ, we know that the optimal quantity is calculated as the square root of 2 times CT times D divided by CE. Again, CT is the order cost, CE is the holding cost. And then if you plug in the values, the optimal Q will be 354. Usually, we will give you an annual discount rate and then the cost of the product, so you can derive the holding cost through there. But in this example, we've just given you the $4, so that's easier. Now, the actual value for Q star was, I think, 353.6. I rounded it to 354. So an important point here is, if you're indifferent between rounding down and rounding up, we usually prefer to round up, because it's always lower cost to go up than to go down when with regards to the Q star. So that's an important point. However, be mindful, on the exam we will ask you specifically how many decimal points you want to round to. So you should follow that instruction. And we will always have a little bit of wiggle room, tolerance limit for rounding errors. So you should be covered most of the time. All right. So I just calculated for you the amount of optimal order quantity. So this store will order 354 units every time. But when should they order? So when do they need to place the order? Does it have to be in the beginning of the year? Does it have to be in the middle? I mean, what would be the timing? So that's the second dimension of determining the policy. We have not discussed lead time yet. If there is no lead time, there is no need to order in advance. You will just wait until your inventory goes down to 0, and then put in another order. And because there is no lead time, it will be immediately arrived, delivered, and then you're fine. You continue with your next cycle. So there's no problem there. But then when you have lead time, then the situation changes. We rarely can ignore the lead time, but there are cases that we can. For instance, if you have a back room that your warehouse, your warehouse is attached to your store, essentially you don't have a problem there. You can immediately replenish inventory. So that could be the case, but it's usually not. This store, for instance, orders from its external supplier, so lead time is a big consideration here. Okay, so imagine the lead time is 1 week. So what do we need to do here? We have to watch our inventory, but we have to place the order before we stock out. If we wait until we stock out and place another order, we will be out of stock for 1 week until the order arrives. Okay, so essentially what's really important is to make sure we don't run out during that lead time, because in other times you're watching our inventory and we can order anytime we see, anytime our policy requires, but we have to make sure we don't run out during that lead time. Okay, so if the supplier takes a week to deliver, we will order Q star 1 week before we stock out. Okay, so this is, in this case, it's simple in a deterministic case. So we know the supplier takes 1 week, so we will order 1 week before we stock out. But then, how do we know when we stock out? The answer lies within the deterministic demand. We know that our consumption has a constant rate. So every week, for instance, we use X amount, we sell X units of the t-shirt. If you extrapolate it through a week, for any period of time, in this case just a week, we know how many products we sell during that week. So then we know how much stock should we have to cover that week. Okay, now imagine, just for simplicity, imagine a year is 50 weeks. Now you just take the total demand and divide it by 50, and then there you go, 200 units. 200 units will be what you need for that to cover the demand for that week. So when do we order? Right when we have 200 units left, which is going to carry us through that week until the supplier delivers. But this is really tight planning. So we have timed our order in a way that by the time that the supplier delivers the batch, we have used everything we have and nothing is left. So immediately a new batch comes in and we continue. This guarantees that we don't have any unnecessary inventory left and gives us the lowest cost. Okay, so our policy would be to order 354 units when we have 200 units in stock. Okay, so in this case, when you have a lead time, essentially you just push back the time of order depending on your estimated consumption during that period of time. Okay, so let me take a quick look at questions and see how you guys are doing before we change it to another question. Okay, so Rajesh is asking, there are multiple attempts available in the exam, but how can we check the first answer? Okay, that's a very good question. So essentially, he's asking, why do we offer multiple attempts when you don't get feedback? And then the answer is, we are not providing these attempts to correct for you as a feedback mechanism. This will be just for correction of known mistakes. So for instance, you put in a value of, say, 353 here, and you'd figured out you've done the rounding wrong. You switch it, change it to 354. So this is just an opportunity for you to erase what you wrote and re-enter it. So, but not intended as an answering as a feedback mechanism. All right, another question about rounding up or not. Usually we make sure that small rounding errors are not causing you to get the wrong answer. So essentially we'll have a small tolerance for most of the questions that will cover rounding errors. So you shouldn't worry about that too much. However, if you follow the instruction, it's always best to follow the instructions exactly. So if you're asking 2 decimals, put in 2 decimals. But if you make a mistake and put in 1 decimal, sometimes it's okay. I can't guarantee that it always will be, but most of the time we make sure um, rounding errors are not a problem. Okay, so all right. So all right, so let's leave the rest of the questions later. I'm trying to answer them little by little instead of giving you a full lectures that could be a little bit boring. So let me then go back to my slides and see what happens next, okay? So we just solved the deterministic case. We know exactly how much we order, we know exactly when we order, and we'll have a happy life managing our inventory in the store. But that's under the ideal scenario. Unfortunately, demand varies, as you'll probably know. It's not a surprise. So demand always varies. Now assume that the distribution of the demand is normal with an average of 1,000 and a standard deviation of 100. Okay, so now we have exactly characterized how does it vary, how much it varies, and what value does it vary around. So we know everything we need to know about the behavior of the demand here. Okay. So let's say the easiest thing to do is to stay with the same policy. Okay. 354, we'll order that amount, and then once we have 200 in the stock. But how is the performance going to be? That EOQ was designed for when we had 1,000 fixed units per year demand. Okay, so anytime the demand is higher than that, you will stock out because you've perfectly matched your EOQ to the demand of 1,000. And half of the time, so essentially half of the time you'll stock out, and the other half of the time you'll have extra inventory left. Okay. Extra inventory is what we have to accept when we have variation. However, stock out is much more detrimental. We usually want to have a very little stock out because that can come up with lots of additional cost to our business. It can lead to loss of customers. So we accept a little bit of higher holding cost, but then try to reduce the rate of stock out. Okay. Now, so the current policy will give us 50% cycle service level. And if you remember, cycle service level was the number of times or the percentage of time that we stock out. In this case, with the EOQ policy, we will stock out half of the time. So if you consider each cycle 1 month, 2 months, whatever, half of those, in half of those, we'll stock out. Okay. So, and that's not good. If you want a better service level, we'll have to do some more math. Okay, and that brings us to continuous review policy. So we can have a periodic review policy or continuous review policy. In this case, this store wants to use continuous review policy, and that's you will be given that information in the problem. Okay, and the choice between two really depends on the business and the complexity of their business. Usually, well, continuous review policy involves watching your inventory all the time and knowing exactly how much you have. In a lot of cases, that's not possible. In some cases, it is. So, for instance, in retail stores, it's really not possible to keep track of everything all the time. So they use periodic review, and that has its own different set of formula, as you know. But continuous review policy is what this store chooses. Their work is simple, so they can implement this policy. So the first thing to note is the stochasticity in demand does not impact the order quantity. So we still go with the Q star that we calculated through the EOQ formula. Okay. The reason is demand is stochastic, yes. However, the average rate of consumption is still 1,000 units per year. So we don't want to order more, which will lead us to have extra unused inventory. So the average inventory level should be the same. However, we will order further, earlier in time, such that we place our order when we have a lot of stock left, which will help us make our sales and not stock out while we're waiting for the delivery. Okay, so you will watch your inventory while you have a lot of stock left. You will place another order during that week that the supplier is shipping your order. That safety stock that you have in place will cover you. And the main question here is, all right, how early should I order? How much should be left in my stock when I order? And that's the reorder point calculation, okay? So the only thing here is the order quantity doesn't change. We still go with the EOQ, but the reorder point has to be calculated carefully with consideration of the trade-off between the service level and the cost of inventory, and so on. Okay, so if you look at the formula in the bottom for the reorder point, S is our reorder point, which is a function of the average demand over the lead time plus K times standard deviation of demand over the lead time. And the first thing you should notice is this is all about demand over the lead time. The total demand or cycle stock is not a factor here because we are watching inventory continuously. And if demand goes up or down, we can time our order according to how fast we are using the inventory. The only time we don't have control over our activities is when the order is out, when you have placed the order and waiting for the supplier to deliver. You should make sure that you order at the right time such that during that week you are covered. So that's the only thing we need to take care of here. We need to know when, basically how much should we have in stock when we order. Okay, so everything from now on in terms of demand and the average and the standard deviation should be calculated for that week, not for the whole year. So going back to our previous information, the yearly demand was normal with an average of 1,000 and standard deviation of 100. Lead time was 1 week. Okay, so how do we convert the yearly demand to the weekly demand? If you look at the key concepts document, we have a section that details how to convert long time period to short time period. Now, simply, the average will be divided proportionally. So 1 week is 1/50th of the whole year. So the average demand will be divided by 50. However, the standard deviation will be divided by square root of 50. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, the weekly demand is now normal with average of 200 and standard deviation of 14. Okay, now recall the equation for reorder point. So it's mu dl plus k times sigma dl. Mu dl is the average of demand over the lead time, which is the 1 week, and standard deviation over that week. So S is going to be 200 plus k times 14. All right, so we solved it up to this point. We figured out the demand during the lead time. Then what is K? How do we calculate K? K is essentially, if you look at the formula, more K means more higher reorder points. So we'll order way early when we have a lot of inventory left, if the K is high. So K is actually a factor that gauges the service level that we have. If we choose a very, very low K, we will order as late as possible, so the rate of stock out will be high. If we choose a high K, we will have a lot of inventory left when we reorder, so the chance of a stock out is low, but then the cost of inventory holding is high. So as always, there's a trade-off between the two. More service level comes with more cost. Okay. So how do we calculate K? First of all, we have to ask management, what kind of service level do you want? In this case, the management says we want to focus on cycle service level. We have other measures of service level, could be fill rate, could be other things. Right now, the management asks you to calculate inventory policy based on a specific service level. They have said we only accept 5% stock out rate, which means the service level cycle service level has to be 95%. If you recall, the definition of cycle service level is the probability or the percentage of time that you will not stock out, which will be 95% in this case for the store. Okay. Excuse me. And going back to the formula for calculating K, it is you have to go to the standard normal distribution and use the inverse function to plug in the cycle service level and calculate the K. So K is actually the point on the normal distribution curve, which covers 95% of the distribution to the left of it. Okay, so if you just use that formula in Excel, your K, when you plug in 95%, your K will be 1.64. All right. With that value, our S or reorder point will be 223. Compare that to what we have previously in the EOQ policy, which was 200. So we have an extra 23 items here, which we call safety stock. So what is it? Essentially, this is what we will always carry in our inventory. This is just the cost we have to pay to take care of the variation and avoid stock out 90% of the time, 95% of the time. So instead of, if we order when we have 200 left, the shipping will arrive on average right when we stock out. But we didn't want that, if you remember. We wanted to order earlier, so we have some hedge against the variation. Here we order when we a little bit earlier when we have 223, and that extra 23 will remain in our warehouse or shelf the whole year. Of course, cycle to cycle, there's going to be variation depending on how high or low the demand is. But on average, we will have that amount always sitting in there, which is a safety stock that helps us. That does exactly what its name says. It keeps us safe from the variations in demand. That's why when you calculate the holding cost of safety stock, you don't have to divide it by 2, because it's always, on average, we always have that 23 in inventory. So the holding cost needs to be multiplied by that safety stock value to give you the holding cost for the safety stock. Okay. So what is this $92 that I'm calculating in the bottom? This is the total cost that you're incurring for holding that 23 units of safety stock. So $92 is the price that we are paying to get that service level under this uncertain condition. Okay, so this way you can calculate the cost of uncertainty, the cost that uncertainty imposes on your supply chain or on your business. Okay, and your policy will be order the same amount. If you remember, 354 is this UQ value, but when you have 223 units, not 200. Okay, so that's a stochastic demand case. Next, I'm going to talk about lead time variability, but before that, let's see if we have any questions. Important questions here. Thank you guys for voting up. That's really helping us answer the most important ones. All right. Can we have an idea of the class average for midterm and homework to date? Yes, we can share some statistics of the average grade. And I'm not sure if that would be too much to do for every homework. That's happened in the past, but we'll share some statistics with you. Probably the overall value and the midterm. That should cover. But maybe if we find a nice and clean way to present the information, we'll also include other activities. So then let me archive this one. All right. So, and then Jade Lee is asking, in some of the week 10 practice problems, it was not clear which cost to include in logistics and transport. Okay, yeah, that's really important. We will be very clear on which cost to include. For instance, pipeline inventory is one that has usually caused confusion. Usually, every run, students ask about this. So, and we are always very, very clear about it. Most of the time, most of the problems you will see that pipeline inventory is you are asked to ignore it, which makes the problem very simple, but it could also happen the other way. Will the final exam put more load on the weeks followed the midterm? Yes, there will be more load there, but the idea is to cover the whole course. So, and then the only reason we will put more load to the second half is because the stuff in the second half will assume that you already know the first half. So you have to make sure your foundation there is solid. A lot of the questions may need your knowledge of the earlier questions. Okay, so the bottom line is you'll have to review the whole course. So shouldn't it be divided by that? The policy should be 20. Yes, you're right. There was it should be 20, not 200. Absolutely. But just assume that demand was 10,000, so we can still continue with the numbers that we have. Okay, I'll fix this on the slide that I share. Okay. Can we discuss the question which was presented in the midterm exam as loss of I have solved 2 of the 4 problems in the video. Hopefully you have seen this. Let me know if otherwise we'll share it with you again. If you go back to the week 5, week off, we'll have videos that solve midterm problems, 2 of them, 2 of the quantitative ones. and hopefully I will answer your questions. The one that's left is there's one more quantitative problem which we thought it's the easier one, and then the other one is the checkboxes. So I'm really hoping that the 2 videos will help a lot of the questions. And holding cost. So remember, I was talking about holding cost of the cycle stock. So holding cost of the safety stock, not the total holding cost. Okay. This is when somebody asks you specifically for holding that extra safety stock in your inventory, how much are you incurring? Okay. All right. So let me move on. You guys are right. Yes, it should be 20, not 200. I'm sorry. So let me go back to our last question. All right. So again, assume that, just ignore the issue of 20 versus 200. Okay, so I'll fix this when I'm posting the final answer. Here I am introducing lead time variability. So what's going to happen is your supplier is going to say, I'll deliver this package to you in a week, but of course it's going to vary. It's not always going to be 1 week, sometimes more, sometimes less. And again, the key is to characterize the variation through explicitly saying what kind of a distribution it follows. In this case, we are assuming normal distribution with average of a week and then standard deviation of half a week. So how do we then identify the distribution of demand over the lead time? Now, again, if you remember, what's really important, everything that we're talking about here is the distribution of demand over the lead time. That's really what's important for us. That's when we don't have any control, and that's when we want to be calculating our inventory policy for, so we are covered and we satisfy customers and meet the service level that we want. Okay, so everything is about the demand distribution over the lead time. Okay, so the only thing that I need to do here is to recalculate the average and standard deviation of demand over the lead time, considering that lead time now varies and also demand varies. So if you remember, once I correct the total demand, you will still have the normal distribution for the weekly demand with an average of 200 and standard deviation of 14. So again, this was a typo. So the yearly demand should be 10,000, such that our average is, our weekly demand is 200 with a standard deviation of 14. Okay. So if you look at the formula on the right, the average demand over the lead time is simple. It's just multiplication of average lead time by average weekly demand. So 200 by 1, which gives us the same 200. So that's simple. But then the standard deviation of demand over the lead time is more complicated. It's a function of average demand and average lead time, and also standard deviations of those. If you plug in the values here, we have 1 week times 14 to the 2 plus 200 to the 2 times half to the 2. And that gives us 101. The very, very important thing here is the standard deviation of lead time is squared here. So it actually has a lot of impact on the total standard deviation that you'll get. If you see, demand is average is 200, right? And 200 to the 2 is 40,000. So it has a very big multiplier, and it's also squared. So when you have a little variation in the lead time, what's going to multiply that to is a very large value. And that's why lead time variation usually has a lot more dramatic effects than demand variation. So you may actually want to tell your supplier, hey, deliver this later. Instead of 1 week, deliver it in, I don't know, 9 days, but be more consistent. And then you could actually do an exercise yourself and see an extra lead time, an extra day or two in the lead time, but a significant reduction in variability will actually save us a lot of cost. Okay, so that's an important thing. As a manager, you always want to make sure lead time is predictable as much as possible, and longer lead times, but consistent ones are preferred to short but variable ones. All right, so our new standard deviation is 101, which is considerably more than the previously calculated value, which was 14. If you remember in the previous problem, when we didn't have lead time variability, standard deviation of demand was 14 over the week, over the lead time. Now it's 104, so it's significant increase, as you can see. Then we plug in the values in the previous formula. So the reorder point is going to be 261, sorry, 461, and that's consists of the average of the demand over the lead time, which is 200, plus 261, which is the safety stock. Again, this safety stock is an extra value, an extra inventory that we have to carry through the whole year to just meet our target service level. Okay. And the cost that we have to pay for that cycle stock is calculated in the bottom, which is 1044. Now, there was one slide that we skipped. I just want to quickly mention this. I've also recalculated. I mean, the part of the previous problem was that instead of 95% safety, 95% service level, the management tells you we only want to accept 0.5% stock out rate, and then that will give us a new CSL of 0.995, and then you get a new K value through the same formula, and then you'll see that you'll incur a higher cost. Here, I'm just trying to demonstrate the fact that if you choose a better service level, your cost will go up. Okay, and then that new K value is what we've used here, so don't get confused. We're using the K value that gives us the higher service level. So let's go back and review our answers here. Okay, if I go back to the stochastic, to the VOQ model, my policy was to order 354 when I have 200 units in stock. When I had stochastic demand and I wanted the cycle service level of 95%, I'm ordering 354 when I have 223 in stock. And then I'm incurring an extra $92 for that safety stock. When I have lead time variability, and so let me first say this. Increasing the service level from 95% to 99.5% increases our safety stock to 36, and the cost of it will be 144. Comparing to the previous one, we had $92. So increase in the safety, in the service level, had around $50 extra cost for us. Now, if I switch to variable lead time, you will see that the cost is almost 10 times higher compared to the original one. So hopefully this example will demonstrate the significant impact that the lead time has. So when I was in class, usually people said management wants more predictable lead time, even though it's longer, and it was um, struck me as a surprise. You actually want longer lead time, but if you actually look at the formulation, you'll see that more consistency is much more important than the length of the lead time. So these three problems will cover some of the first half of the course and a lot more in the second half. You should expect similar difficulty in problems. So we'll give you a story. We'll ask you a couple of questions that are derived from the formula that we have already discussed. There should be extra discussions about understanding these formulas. For instance, when you look at any of these formula, you have to know how they behave in general. Just like the example I said, the impact of lead time is going to be, the impact of variation of lead time is more important than variation of the demand in this formula. And just by looking at it, you could understand that. Similarly, if you go back to the EOQ formula and the Q star formula, it will be clear that how Q star changes when other values change. So you have to have some understanding of the sensitivities. For instance, if the order cost goes up, you have to order less frequently in larger amounts. So there is a negative relationship between Q star and ordering cost. Sorry, a positive relationship. And then when the holding cost goes up, you have to order smaller amounts so you don't have that much stock left in your inventory. So understanding these general sensitivities is very important. It also helps you gain deeper insights toward the forces that are operating against each other in the real world and in the real operations. So it's really important for you to do that exercise regardless of whether you're practicing for the exam. It helps you understand how things move and why we actually arrive at these solutions. And then, as always, you're going to have 4 problems. One is going to be checkboxes. 3 of them will be quantitative. And we will try to cover as much as possible. So the questions will target most of the weeks that we've discussed, slightly more focused on the second half. All right, so with that, I think we can take a quick look again at the Q&As and see if there are ones that I can answer quickly right now. Otherwise, we will read the rest of the questions and provide a summary of the answers. So there's a question about fixed transportation costs being accounted into ordering cost only. So so let me explain this. In the mode choice problems, when we have a transportation cost, we have an opportunity to incorporate that cost through the formulas that we already have. So in the EOQ model, for instance, we already have a cost for order. Every time you order, you incur a fixed cost. Now, if your transportation cost follows the same path, and it doesn't depend on the size of order. So there are a lot of shippers that say, we will ship you a container, no matter how much you order, it's going to be this fixed cost. So in that sense, you could simply add up the transportation cost to the fixed cost of ordering and calculate a new value. And continue with your EOQ calculations. Now, if your transportation cost is a function of the size of order, it will be much more similar to the holding cost. So you will add it to your holding cost. To your purchase cost. So if purchasing one unit costs $10 and the shipping for that costs another $1 per unit, you can just assume that the price of the item is $11. Okay, so this is a way that we bake the transportation cost into our parameters that we already have for the EOQ model. Okay. What is the pass rate for SC1x in the past runs? I don't know off the top of my head, but it's somewhere between 60 and 75%. But we'll share more details with you once we share the statistics. So it's not a very high pass rate. It's also not a very low one. And that's, I think, the right amount, because it guarantees that the questions and the quality and difficulty is at the right amount. It's challenging, but a lot of people have an easy time passing. So is it going to be as difficult as the midterm? So the final should be slightly more difficult compared to the midterm. It also has more points. 45% of the grade comes from final, compared to 35% that was for midterm. So it's slightly more difficult, but not too much. Okay, and then so is the green or red button? No. So again, we don't have feedback in the final exam, so you won't see the red or green check mark. You will just submit your answers, and you'll get a grade. So you won't know which ones were right or wrong. All right. So let's answer maybe one more. Again, so yes, I mean, the holding cost is, just like we said, a multiplication of how much you hold. So we just discussed the holding cost for the safety stock. So you just take the safety stock and multiply the yearly cost of holding, and then that gives you the cost of safety stock. The reason I talked about this separately is that we talk a lot about the holding cost in the EOQ arena, where the holding cost is calculated by multiplying the CE by half of the Q. So your order, when you order Q star, you have a lot of items delivered to your warehouse. So you'll have you increase the stock by Q, but then over time it goes down until it stocks out. So the average is actually half of the Q. But when we talk about safety stock, that value always stays in your warehouse, so you don't have to divide it by 2. Now, is the bootcamp free? Follow the link. No, it's not. So, and I don't exactly remember how much does it cost, but then the link that's going to be on the slide, or you could just Google it, will give you all the information you want. And then I think this is a good time for us to wrap it up. Okay, so thanks a lot for joining. There were a typo, incorrect calculation in the demand, so I'll fix that and I'll share the updated slides with you. Thanks a lot for joining. Thanks a lot for good questions. And for further, I mean, my main goal in this live event was to share with you examples of the kind of depth that we need you to have for the questions, not to provide a specific example not to limit your attention to a specific topic. So make sure you cover every topic that's there. However, you just try not to memorize equations. You have to have a good understanding of how things change as a function of each other, and avoid a mechanical practice of get numbers, put in formula, and then generate the value. The main reason for that would be that in a real situation, in real business, nothing will ever follow the formula that you'll see here. There's going to be quite a bit of variation. Nothing's going to be exactly normal. Nothing's going to be exactly laid out. You can't include all the costs possible in your clean and nice formula that we have here. So you have to have the ability to have a higher understanding, deeper understanding of the forces and the costs that are playing against each other, to be able to adjust some of the things here. Like I said, if you had not taken the course, if you have not taken the last week, but you understood the EOQ very well, you would be able to bake the transportation cost as part of it. Similar things may happen in different places. You may have damage costs that you have to include as part of your EOQ. You may have handling or sales costs. A deeper understanding will help you do that. And if you lack that, you won't be able to take the knowledge that you gain in the course and apply it to real situations. So that's really something we really want to emphasize. Again, good luck in the final. It's going to be open tomorrow. Wish you the best of luck, and we will share the slides in the same area that you saw the live event in. And see you later. Thank you very much.